Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for another one of Lifetime's adoption webinars. My name is Libby Murray, and joining me tonight are adoptive parents that we had the pleasure of assisting through their first adoption when they came to Lifetime, and they were parents to be. They adopted their little boy through us about 3 years ago, and I'm happy to welcome Ryan and Brandi tonight. Just real quick, I wanted to go over how you can reach us if you have any questions or comments during our webinar tonight, or even after if you have things that you'd rather talk about one-on-one that pertain to your adoption specifically. As you can see on your screen, if you're joining us that way, you can call us Monday through Friday at 530-432-7373. You can always get more information at our website, which is lifetimeadoption.com, and our general email is adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. However, if you're already working with Lifetime, regardless of the phase that you're in with your adoption planning, you may already know the direct email and extension to your Lifetime coordinator, so she is always happy to help you as well. But we just want to make sure that you get as much information as you need before you decide to pursue adoption, but that also that support continues while you're waiting to adopt, because I don't think it's ever possible to know everything before you begin, and that it really is sort of a perpetual learning process that we want you to be as prepared as possible by the time your child's birth mother chooses you. So without further delay, I want to welcome Ryan and Brandi tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you for asking.
Wonderful. I know now you guys, you're on Central Time, right? You guys are from Mississippi?
Yes.
Excellent. So, and which helps because we have an audience, spread across the U.S. and I know that there's people joining us who just got off work, and there's people joining us who are probably winding down after dinner. So I'm just so glad to have everyone here. Ryan, while you're there, we can hear you both, and I'm so glad to have you here because I think not only, I've gotten to know Brandi mostly through her adoption journey with you, but also after. But I love when I can have the whole couple on here and get that varied perspective. Why don't we hear from you first, Ryan, on what it took to get you guys to the point of deciding to start your first adoption?
I guess that's really more of a Brandi question. I'm kind of disappointed you gave that one to me. Because my answer to that is Brandi got me to that point. We both wanted to adopt, and I think we had already made that personal decision before we had ever even met each other. Which, if the people look at our picture on the page, we're both in our 20s. We're young. We married young. But that was just a desire in my heart before I even knew Brandi. And we weren't able to get pregnant right away, and which is a big deal. So instead of spending a ton of money on fertility and things that may or may not work, we decided to put the money into adoption, which is a guaranteed child. And it's a life-changing experience for somebody, or for many people, for everybody involved.
And Brandi, I know that you also had a long, deep-seated call on your heart to adopt someday. So was it a surprise to you when you guys started beginning your family and it started looking more and more like that's how our family's going to come together?
It wasn't a surprise. I was just thankful for the opportunity.
So, and you guys did mention, I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, that you guys are both in your 20s, which I think is an asset to your story, because so many times adoptive parents might come to adoption later, maybe because of years of trying to conceive, or maybe, not everyone meets the person they want to marry and start their family with, early in their 20s. And so it's unique to have your perspectives from that side, because I would say on average most of the families that Lifetime works with are usually, I would say 30s and 40s. So when, since you brought that up, was that ever a concern as you started learning more about adoption? Did you ever think, gosh, are we too young to adopt? Because I get the question asked a lot, are we too old to adopt? But I know that you guys have a different perspective on that. So what was that like when you started thinking, okay, we're going to start this, now we have to find out how?
Well, I don't think I ever thought about it while we were doing it. It wasn't until last summer I said, wow, we were really young to do this. Because we went to a gathering and we met a lot of other people that have chosen to adopt internationally, and I was like, wow, I feel out of place, and not because of our kids, because they all had kids that look like ours. I was like, we're the youngest people here by far.
Really?
And it was kind of awkward at first till we got to know everybody. The only thing we have in common at this point is the color of our children, and the fact that we all adopted, because we were at least 10 years younger than most of the people there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So at the time, no, we didn't think it was a big deal that we were too young.
You didn't think it was a big deal, but I did. One of the first questions I asked, I don't know if I asked you or somebody else in Lifetime, but I was concerned that birth mom wouldn't pick us because of our age. It was a concern that I had, but obviously that wasn't the concern because they picked us.
Right. So keeping that in mind too, because, and many of you on the call joining us tonight, you know that Ryan and Brandi's family came together through two different types of adoption. Lifetime works with private open adoptions in the U.S., and what we know about international adoption is mostly from the experiences of the families that we've assisted who have gone through that process. I mean, also we know about it, but it's just that's not our expertise. So as you guys were researching how you wanted to pursue your first adoption, how did you decide to go with an open adoption in the U.S. over starting with an international adoption?
We just typed in, Googled it, adoption in general, and Lifetime came up. And we were really interested. I liked your birth mom program, the different things that you offer for them and how you help them. I really liked that.
It seemed fair. It seemed legitimate. Yeah. When you compare agencies and facilitators, domestic and internationally, and look at what the laws really are for each state, because each state has their own adoption laws. When you look at what the state requires and what the rules are, and look at what agencies and facilitators are offering, then it becomes easy to weed out, well, what are good agencies and what are bad facilitators.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or vice versa.
So
basically what fits your family at the time.
Well, and I know that you guys have a lot of your adoption decisions and your steps are rooted deeply in your faith, right?
Yeah.
So, for those on the call who don't quite know, not everyone experiences answers to prayer in the same way. But what was that like for you? What continued to make it clear to you and give you peace about, okay, this is the right next step. This is the right next step. What did that look like for you as your adoption path unfolded?
Well, for me, almost like I could see miracles happening, literally. Just different circumstances throughout the adoption process. Both of them, things would happen that just shouldn't have happened. Doors were open that shouldn't have been.
Really? Being a young couple, was funding your adoption ever an issue or a concern for you guys?
Yes and no. was a financial blessing to be able to do it. But no matter if you have the money or not, but the timing.
Right, that's good.
Timing was hard for me.
What do you mean by that?
It was at a time in my early career as a firefighter and paramedic when we started the process, and I was still going through paramedic school when we started the process, and it was just I don't know if school was an added stress or the adoption was an added stress because Brandi did all the paperwork. I just signed my name.
Yeah.
So my wife took care of most of it. But I was out of school and working a little extra before Aiden was born. And by the time Aiden was born, everything had calmed down and relaxed a lot, and I was able to take off as much time from work as I needed to adjust to our new family life. Just like as if it was a pregnancy and we had actually had a baby, I was allowed to take the amount of time off that I needed as if that would happen. You know? But
great. So,
but it's,
Brandi, were you working at the time before you brought Aiden home?
No, I was at home.
Okay. So I know that's different for every employer. And some families, whether you're the prospective father or the prospective mother, they're not always sure, how soon do I prep my employer to know that we're adopting and that I don't know when it's going to happen, unlike with a pregnancy where you can say, I found out my wife is pregnant, she's going to give birth in 6 months.
right.
Can you share a little bit about, especially I think since you had just gotten out of your training, I'm guessing you were a relatively new hire, that could have even been a little bit, uncertain, like, well, are they even going to work with me on this? How and when did you decide to approach your employer about what might happen?
If I had a typical job, which being a paramedic firefighter isn't typical, and as a civil service employee, I'm automatically given 2 weeks as soon as I start my career, 2 weeks vacation. And then I guess I've been there for a couple of years by the time Aiden was born, so I'd accrued a little more than that. And going through paramedic school the year before, I didn't have a chance to take vacation, so it accrued pretty well. And we schedule our vacation time almost a year in advance. It's hard to get off like the shift before. At certain times of the year, you can't get off because the guy senior to me had already taken off. Well, when it came time to do my scheduling with my supervisor, I told him, I said, look, we're planning on adopting, and everything. Our process went by really fast. I said, I'd rather not even try to schedule any time because when the baby's born, I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know when a family's going to choose us, but I might just have to take off and go during the middle of a shift. And he was like, yeah, that's cool, whatever. We'll work it out.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was too simple.
And we did have a question that came in just now that wanted to know, because you said that it went pretty fast. How long, once you guys just, got into the process to adopt and you were home study ready, how long did you wait until you found out about Aiden?
From the time we sent out our little books to send to y'all, it was 6 months.
Okay. And I just wanted to back up just a little bit too, because there are many times when we hear from families that the journey they walked through before coming to a decision to adopt often includes infertility or pregnancy losses. And I know, Ryan, you guys said that you had a hard time getting pregnant, but did you also experience infertility and miscarriage along the way?
Yes.
Was that a surprise for you guys, or did did you know, before you had started trying that you might have difficulty conceiving?
We got married. We got pregnant a year later. That was our first pregnancy. And we just kept losing babies.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the money at the time or the insurance to go to the doctor to find out exactly what was causing it. Mm-hmm. And we did eventually go, before we brought Abigail home. We went to a fertility specialist, and she explained to us what was causing the miscarriages.
Wow.
And it's fixable, I guess. Well, obviously it's fixable. But we just, when they offered us the solution, it just wasn't worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't worth the money to try to do it. When we knew it, when they told us it was going to eventually correct itself, it wasn't worth the money to spend money to hurry up and correct it now. So we
spent it on Abigail's adoption.
Oh, wow. So, and I think that's such a good point you bring up, because it breaks my heart when I get calls from hopeful parents and they've spent years pouring and investing into infertility treatments, and it's not that's a bad choice or an unwise decision, but I know so many people that they look back once they start adoption, or now they want to start adoption, but they can't necessarily get the funds together, or maybe they're just so worn out and drained from the journey emotionally that they're just grieving where they've come from for so long. But that so many times we hear that, that we put all of our money and our investment into infertility treatments, and now looking back, sometimes we wish we would have invested in our adoption sooner. When I just think everyone's different, and what I love hearing about you guys is that you already had the desire to adopt, and that it sounds like you really were a partnership. So even though Brandi was the one who, kind of took you by the hand, Ryan, and said, like, we're going to do this, sign here.
Yeah, you had the cattle prod.
But that you guys also were a partnership along the way, too, and talking about when is the right time for us. And do you think that, looking back, how many pregnancy losses did you have before you even decided to start researching adoption?
Well, I had been researching adoption for a long time, like before we even got married.
Oh, wow.
So I knew quite a bit about adoption before we had any fertility issues at all. It was just a matter of me turning 21 before we could actually adopt.
For your home study purposes?
Yes.
Which we do. Some of the calls that we take every day are from young people, young couples, or couples that are about to get married, and I know in most states there is a minimum age requirement. So that's, it's interesting that you guys were just chomping at the bit, but that was what was holding you back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by then we were married for 3 years.
So you start with your first adoption. What was the concept of open adoption new to you guys, or had you heard of open adoptions and kind of understood, what that might look like for you?
I have one of my best friends. 2 of her sisters are adopted, and the youngest one had an open adoption with her birth mom. And so I grew up pretty much seeing the relationship, and I really liked it. I felt like it helped. It helped the little girl. It helped the birth mom, and it was a blessing to see both adoptive mom and birth mom come together to make the best decisions for their daughter.
How about you, Ryan? Because I know for some men, sometimes that protective dad quality gets the hackles up a little bit about open adoption. What was it like for you as you learned what that might look like for your family?
Well, I didn't have a clue what it was before, but just to look at the definition of it, I was like, I had reservations about it.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at playing devil's advocate and trying to see both sides of it, I was okay with it.
Mm-hmm. So now, Brandi, you and I was trying to remember some of the details leading up to Aiden, and it sounded to me when you were telling your story, you guys had what we like to call a drop in the lap. So you didn't know about him or his birth mother until she was in labor. Is that right?
Yeah, we had no idea.
So what was that like for you guys? Were you prepared that could happen, that it could just happen on the fly?
I was not prepared at all.
We
had no clothes.
Yeah.
We had no baby stuff.
Yeah.
We had diapers, but he was so big that he couldn't fit in newborn diapers.
Really?
We prepared a nursery in neutral colors.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know when we were going to have a baby or what it was going to be.
It was going to be a boy or girl. We had no idea. So all we had was the nursery ready.
And the morning that we got the call, I was still finishing my degree, and I was at school taking a test. And I just had to go to school to take the test, and we were leaving to go watch a movie, and Brandi was sitting in the car.
Yeah.
So I got out of my test that I failed, by the way. Got in the car, and Brandi's all smiles. She's like, "Come on, we got to go home." I'm like, "Good, we don't have to go watch this Twilight movie."
That's funny. That is a good memory. Now, we had a question come in just now that said you guys are, you mentioned you're in Mississippi. Did you always know that you were going to bring home an African-American child? Were you specifically pursuing an African-American adoption? But I remember you guys are pretty open, right?
Yes, we were open to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when you ask for a preference of the family,
mm-hmm.
Like, do you want a Caucasian girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, that has a lot to do with how long you're going to wait.
Oh my God. But for me and Ryan, we're just so different. Like, we look so different.
Mm-hmm.
If we had biological children, we wouldn't know. Well, we will have a biological child soon, but
right.
We'll find out. But we wouldn't know if
they were going to be dark-skinned or lighter with brown hair, brown eyes, or blonde hair and green eyes.
Yeah, and it's just.
So that wasn't really having a child of a similar race or background to you wasn't a priority. And we had a follow-up question that came in that said, "Yeah, I've been wondering the same thing because I live in Alabama, and my town's pretty small and not very diverse. What would you tell? What would you tell the family? Was that ever a concern for you guys that you might live in an area where they wouldn't support you adopting a child of a different race?"
Yes, and we.
Yes and no. We kind of knew that the community, the small town and small-minded community that we live in, may not accept it, but we're the kind of people that just don't care. Mm-hmm. And you have to be prepared for that before you make that decision.
Yeah.
You got to know how you're going to react to it, no matter where you live. You can't say, well, I'm going to have to go move to this community because I know that community will be more accepting of my family and my decisions. Mm-hmm. You can't care about what other people think. It's like we don't care now, and we haven't ever, but it has hurt our feelings before, and it has put us under stress before, but you have to know how to deal with it, and that's how we do it.
You learn along the way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're so right, because no matter where you live, there's always going to be people that don't understand. And I think about Sacramento. I think about the cities I've been to, and people from small non-diverse towns move to the city, and they carry along with them some of their misunderstandings and their fears. So no matter where you live, you're so right, you have to be prepared for questions. And I would say, not to scare people either, but just that the reality is, even if this child had your same skin color, but, you know, had a big mop of curly hair, or, you know, like you said, green eyes, or was, you know, super tall or super short, or anything that was kind of different than what might have been put together by you biologically, people would have still had questions.
Yeah.
And, you know, how do you handle that now when, you know, living where you do and having these two beautiful children that obviously you did not give birth to? Do you get stopped a lot and have people ask you, you know, can you tell me about your adoption story, or do you just get looks, or how do you handle that when the difference comes up?
Well, let me say this real quick. I know Brandy's ready to spill her guts and say something. But,
what do you say?
It used to be a lot of fun when Aiden was a newborn and we carried him around in this little car seat when we'd go inside and eat somewhere. Because he'd be all bundled up and covered up with the little hood over the thing, sitting in a booth, and people would walk up, oh, let's see the baby, let's see the baby, and you take back the covers, and they're like,
they're in shock.
oh, their smile turns to confusion. And it was just funny to us. We love going out in public and just to see people's confusion. But as kids get older, you don't get as many smiles. You just see confusion and curiosity. But their curiosity may look like, oh my gosh, what are they thinking? But that's just ignorance, and they just don't know. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, go ahead, Brandi.
You have to educate people, basically. And sometimes they don't want to listen, or they don't want to hear what you have to say. And that's when you just have to walk away from the whole situation, which I try. I'm very protective of my children, and I try to keep them out of any bad situation that could come. And when we are around, like if we go to a restaurant, there are times that we can't even sit down and enjoy our meal without people just staring at us while we're eating. And I just want to yell at them and say, stop staring at me, just leave our family alone and let us eat in peace.
Well, she can't, but I can.
He can ignore it, but I have a hard time doing that. I mean, because it affects my children.
And we had that question in that said, do you ever worry that other people's misunderstandings will get to your kids?
Yes, and we have to be careful with how we respond to the negativity and the hateful comments or the ugly stares that we get, because our children are watching us, and they're going to react the same way that we do. And if we blow up on people, they're going to do the same thing. And we don't want that. We don't want them to hate others.
Right. Which, you know, that you don't have to respond the way other people might expect you to respond, that you're trying to be good parents and show your children how they should treat a family like you, but also to see their own value as your family just is. I love that.
And I learned that you do not have to tell anybody about your adoption story, how your children came to you. You don't have to even tell anybody that you adopted them. We don't say, we don't ever introduce our kids as our adopted children. We just say that they're our children. And if they specifically ask us if they're adopted, we'll say yes, and we just leave it alone.
Because some people's minds are already made up before they even ask you a question.
Some people think that I cheated on Ryan.
Their opinions are already established before they even open their mouth. So whatever questions that they have, you're probably not going to persuade them of your own personal decision while you're passing them in the grocery store.
And you don't have to explain to anybody. And if somebody comes up to us and is rude, we can just walk away. We don't have to explain to them, you know, why we chose to adopt, or we don't have to answer their questions.
How about your friends and your family? you know, a lot of times couples, when they decide to start adoption, sometimes they have fears not only about adopting a child of a race different than their families, but just about telling their family, we're going to adopt. Did your family, you know, back your decision to adopt? What was that like for you guys?
It didn't go over very well.
You're going to find out who your friends are.
And you're, you're stuck with your family, but you don't have to have anything to do with them, and we learned that too. Mm-hmm. There are some family members that we just don't...
That you can live without.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have that as much of a problem now as when we first adopted Aiden. It didn't go over very smoothly on either side of our family because we do live in the South, and I was raised how my parents were raised. But if I'm capable of changing, so are they. If I can be persuaded that this is the right thing to do, so can they. And as my wife pointed out, there's just certain people that just because they've lived around you all your life, they don't have to have anything to do with you now.
And when you have your child, it's not even an issue. You don't even care that you're not around them anymore because your child comes first.
Right. Because the child that you adopt takes the place of everybody else around you anyway.
So it wasn't even just that you chose to adopt a child with black skin. It was they didn't understand your choice to adopt anyways. What were their reasons? Did they think you should just be childless, or?
My dad felt like, I guess because of my pregnancy, he felt like I could eventually carry a child, a biological child, and I guess that's what he wanted for us. But it's not what everybody else wants for us. It's what we want for our family.
Yeah, and what I like to point out to everybody that I talk to about adoption is adoption wasn't a last resort for us. We don't see it that way, and we made it a point we're adopting instead of doing fertility treatments and stuff because we want to adopt. We're not going to spend all this money on infertility treatments to possibly have a child. We're going to go ahead and do what we want to do, which is adopt anyway, because adoption is not our last resort to have a child. We're just doing this first.
You know, and you talked about some of the groups that you've gotten together with other adoptive parents. So you've probably heard just so many different stories leading people to adoption. When you meet people and they don't, maybe they share with you that they're having trouble conceiving. You know, I know that you guys, again, you walk in very strong faith in your heart for adoption. I just love how greatly you advocate for birth parents, for adoption in general, for these children. You know, what's the first step you usually encourage someone to do when they're just not sure if they're going to adopt, or if they have those fears that you've come across, but they're open to learning? You know, what are some of the tips you learned along the way that, like you were talking about earlier, about the things that stand out about the different places that can help you adopt? But even before getting to that point, have you had people ask you before, well, we're just not even sure we're ready?
Well, first of all, you have to grieve, especially if you tried for a long time to have a biological child. There's a point where you just have to grieve for what could have been. And if they're not ready yet, then they're not ready. And if I see that, then I don't even talk to them about adoption, because they obviously, they see my children, they know they're adopted, and I don't say anything unless somebody asks me.
Right. We had a question come in. I want to, before I address this question, which is about how you incorporate your children's cultural heritage into your family life, I want to talk about Abigail. So first, you guys had an open adoption, and I know you and I were talking earlier, Brandi, you know Aiden's birth mother, but you don't keep in touch regularly. Is that right?
Yes, she doesn't respond back to any of our. I mail her letters, just updates, and send her pictures every 3 to 6 months, and she hasn't responded in a couple of years, I guess. But we just keep doing it because I did promise her that I would do that, and I think it's important for Aiden.
And did you end up, because it was such a last-minute opportunity, did you end up meeting each other when she gave birth?
No.
She did not want to meet us.
Okay. So in this situation, was it one where she had asked Lifetime to choose a family for her, and that's how you got involved, or had she chosen you from your profile?
She chose us and from the profile.
Uh-huh. Cool.
She just wanted us, and
she just waited till the last minute.
She did.
So then we go, and you said Aiden's adoption was final, and I know the picture's on the screen right now. I think that bottom one was from your day in court, right?
It was.
So then how long did it take for you to start realizing we're being called to adopt again, and this time it's going to be different than Aiden's, and we think we're going overseas?
Well, I just knew that we were going to get another one even before Aiden came along.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that child was going to be older. And Africa just seems to be, when we called around to a lot of agencies here in the U.S. and domestic adoption, they said, oh, we just deal with newborns. We don't do older child adoption. And so that's when we went the international way.
Mm-hmm.
And Congo just kind of popped up randomly. And I learned a lot about the country before I even considered looking at their orphan situations, and I wanted to learn about the country first.
That's a really good tip that I don't know that all parents think of. You know, when you're called to adopt overseas, I think a lot of times they get so wrapped up in the logistics, like how's this going to happen and how many times do we have to travel and how long will it take. But actually, that's really cool that you could slow down and say, okay, but I want to know about where our child will have lived already, especially since she was, now how old was Abigail when you met her?
She was, we still don't really know her true age, but she was roughly 2. And the attorney told us when we got the phone call about Abigail, she said, you know, the paperwork says that she's 2, but she could be 3, 4, or even 5. She was just sitting on her, she looked like a 2-year-old.
And these photos are from when you were in the Congo meeting her for the first time?
Yes.
Wow. So having moved through Aiden's adoption, and here you took this drive to go meet him in the hospital, and now you're flying across the world to go meet a child that you're not even certain how old she is. What was that like in your head? I mean, because some families adopt the same way twice, and they struggle not to compare their adoptions because even within the same type of adoption, every adoption is different. What was that like for you guys to have this one experience and then this completely vast experience with a toddler?
It was very educational.
Yeah.
It was different. Everything was different. I mean, they're both adopted, but their adoptions are completely different in every way. And you just have to, just go with it.
Yeah. And I know, and I'm going to bring up this photo here, we had a question that come in that said, so how long, you know, once you decided to pursue an international adoption, and you already knew that you wanted to adopt an older child, how long did it take before you knew about Abigail?
We called in, I want to say it was November, and we got the phone call about Abigail in February.
Okay, so just a few months, really.
Yeah.
And then how long until they asked you to come over and bring her home?
From February to her referral, we accepted her referral February 28th, and we were on a plane on our anniversary, July 15th.
July 15th, our 5th wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, that's a cool memory. Just mark that milestone with her. So the photo I brought up here, now you can see that she doesn't have her hair in this photo. So what were some of the things you learned about the children over there? Were you prepared for some of the health issues that they might have, just having been in the conditions they were in?
No.
No. It was interesting and really gross at the same time to have discussions about parasites with other families that were with us and dealing with the parasites with their children.
See, the picture before is the morning that we first met her. That was July 16th. She had hair.
Yeah,
a couple days later, after we had gave her her first bath and no telling how long, she got all these little sores all over her head from parasites
embedded into her scalp,
and we had to shave her head.
Oh. One of the questions that came in, and I know, Brandi, you and I talked about this earlier, because you said the one of the things you learned was that when people find out you're adopting from Africa, they start asking you about all this medical testing on the children.
They do.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Was that, because I know
that's a popular question.
Right.
Everybody wanted to know if she was HIV positive.
Yeah.
Just because she was from Africa.
Just because she was from Africa. Everybody. I mean, we'd say, oh, we're going to Congo, we're getting a little girl, and they're like, oh, is she HIV positive? Like, just because she's from Africa does not mean that she's HIV positive.
What if my kid drinks after your kid?
Yeah.
Can they even play together? Is it safe?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, the ignorant questions.
Right, and again, the opportunity to just educate these people who don't know. Now, with her, because she's about, you think she's about a year older than Aiden?
Supposedly, she's 9 months older than Aiden, but we think she's a year and a half older than Aiden.
Yeah, because she's not that tiny anymore.
Oh, no, definitely not.
She's big, she's big.
And tall.
She's tall and skinny, but I mean, she's got big muscles.
She's healthy now.
Much longer hair.
Yeah. And how did you guys? So you already had, one experience with a newborn adoption and domestic adoption, and one of the families in the audience tonight asked, how did you decide to do international after you'd already had one kind of experience?
Well, basically just because every agency that we called about the second adoption, they all told us that they did newborn adoptions, and so we knew that if we were to go international, that we would get a toddler or older.
Mm-hmm. So birth order was never a concern of yours? Because I know for some families that already have a child, sometimes they have concerns that there's, that there's issues bringing a child in who's older than the first one who was brought in through adoption.
Well, we had a discussion about it. Mm-hmm. Brandi said, "Do you care?" And I said, "No, I don't care." And that was the discussion.
It just didn't seem. It just didn't seem important, I guess.
When you consider the needs of children overseas compared to the physical needs of children here, that shouldn't even be an issue as far as birth order.
It was never an issue. The birth order, it didn't concern me at all. And Abigail, she's definitely meant to be the oldest child.
Really? She seems really confident and independent, like she kind of wants to keep track of everybody.
What you doing? Mommy, what's that? Daddy, what you doing?
She wants to know everything.
And she wants to help you. Whatever you're doing, she wants to help you. She's the helper of your family.
She's definitely meant to be the big sister. And
Abigail, go find Aiden's shoe. Okay. And she's got it. Like, how did you even find
that? Let me see here. We have a few questions coming in from the audience. So going back to that, you guys do live where your family stands out. How do you incorporate their cultural background, or do you have groups that you go and participate in, or in your church? Do you have other families that might be built through adoption that you have that in common with?
We do not. There's one other family, transracial adoptive family, and they just brought their son home recently, just less than 6 months ago, and they live in our area. And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no group, there's no support group, but through Abigail's organization that helped us bring Abigail home, they have what they call a family reunion every year, and we're trying to go to that, and it's not that big of a deal for Aiden because he's not Congolese, but at least he can see that there are other families just like his.
And another way we incorporate Abigail's heritage in our home is like we got these little Congolese flags that we bought from the country, and we brought them back with us, and they're just toys for the kids. They go play with the little Congolese flag all the time. And
we try to cook.
Once a month we'll have Congolese beans and rice because she loves beans and rice. That's absolutely her favorite food. And it doesn't matter what kind of beans, but we make sure we cook Congolese beans and rice every now and then.
And are there needs? Because, well, I think no matter what family you grow up in, you learn about children and just how to take care of your own body, your own health, your spiritual welfare, and that even family to family, that sometimes there are other people that almost seem like a completely different culture because that's not how their family, was made up. But are there things that you've had to continue to stay researched on, like skincare or the questions that the children have as they start growing up and realizing, Mom and Dad, especially for Aiden, I think, Mom and Dad look different than my sister and I do. What's that about? Are there things that you anticipate in your future that you will have so that you can continue to recognize that they do have a difference, but it's to be celebrated and it just makes you who you are? How do you address those questions within your family?
Abigail already knows.
Yeah.
Right.
She's intelligent.
Very smart.
And I think she's going to help us explain to Aiden when he gets older.
Probably.
She's going to overhear his question to us, and she's going to interrupt like the big sister and be the little helper that she is and answer it for us.
But as far as skincare and hair care goes, I do Abigail's hair myself. It's part of our bonding time, because when you adopt an older child, you don't get the same bonding time that you would with an infant, like I did with Aiden. And so hair time is our special time together, and I had to learn a lot.
Yeah. Hair time used to take 8 hours.
Yeah. It's gotten a lot better, though.
And bonding time wasn't always so nice.
No.
It takes time.
Oh, dear. And that's a good question, is because with any older child adoption, whether it's overseas or in your backyard, there are sometimes bonding issues to consider. Were you guys prepared for the needs that she might have as she adjusted to your family life?
We read books, and while it seemed like they were preparing us, they really weren't. Nothing's going to prepare you for your child in general. I've learned that. And books can be helpful, but each child is different and their situation is different and how they handle their adoption and what they've been through in their past is different, and you just have to go with it.
If somebody wrote a chapter on each different kind of child that you'd have to prepare for, that'd be a really long book.
Yes. So what did you guys have to do when what were the things you learned you would need to do or that you started doing once you got her home?
When we brought her home, one of the first things I did, other than make sure she was healthy, take care of her health, was call the psychiatrist and the therapist because I knew she was going to need it. And it's very important, and it's helped us a lot. It's helped us big time.
I had already been, we spent 5 weeks in Congo, so I'd already been away from work quite a while, but I was off for an additional another week after we got home before I went back to work. And I didn't want to go back to work then because once we got home, we'd go somewhere every day to show her things that she's never seen before, like chicken nuggets from McDonald's, boom, blew her mind, and she knew nothing about that.
The grocery store was amazing to her.
Oh yeah, just
food, her eyes
just looking at her face, it was like Christmas morning every morning to a child, just because she'd see something new every day.
And there are a lot of firsts that you don't think that you would have with a child that's older. Like when with Aiden, we saw him walk, take his first steps and say his first words. Yeah. Those are things that we missed out with Abigail, but we also got a lot of firsts with Abigail.
Yeah, we got to see the look on her face first trip to Walmart.
Yeah, that would be a culture shock.
It was.
It is.
For her.
When you get off the plane in the middle of the night in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's a culture shock.
Yes, it is.
So we knew it was going to be a culture shock for her.
So do you guys see adoption in your future?
Yes, definitely.
Now, I know you did mention, I don't know if everyone in the audience caught it, but you actually are you 6 months along now, Brandi? You're pregnant right now.
I'm 28 weeks.
Yeah,
so, and you have a little girl on the way.
Yes.
What has that been like to have moved through all the pregnancy losses and then get these darling children of yours? How is this pregnancy received now?
It's very difficult some days because, again, I feel like I have to educate people. They'll ask us questions, or they'll say, in front of my children, oh, we're so happy you're going to have one of your own now. And I'm like, well, I have 2 of my own already, but thanks for not noticing.
Yeah, that's being nice about it.
Yeah. But I have to, explain, because Aiden still really doesn't understand, but Abigail does, and I have to explain to her that some people just don't understand adoption the way that we do, and they don't understand that you can love any child all the same. And she's learning, and we're learning, and
yeah, that's a question that Brandi deals with. Well, that we both deal with that annoys Brandi. The thing that I get now that annoys me is, what is it? Oh, you guys are pregnant now? They said that's what always happens after you adopt a child. You get pregnant, and I'll go back to what I said before. Adoption was not our last resort. We did that because we wanted to. We knew we would end up having children biologically eventually, but adoption was not a last resort.
Yeah. So how are Aiden and Abigail taking the pregnancy?
So far, they love it. I think Aiden's going to be pretty disappointed that he's not going to be the baby anymore.
He'll have the middle child syndrome.
Will. Abigail is really excited about being a big sister again. She specifically told me when I first got pregnant, wanted a baby sister.
Mm.
And so she's getting one.
Yeah. Well, she's going to be surprised if there is a surprise at that birth. Well, I'm so grateful for your input tonight, and we have a few minutes left, so if any of you have a question for Ryan and Brandi tonight, we'd love for you to chime in. I think we tried to touch on the questions that people were popping in tonight. Looking back, and I think obviously what you guys said, you see adoption in your future, so really this is an ongoing story for your family. What are maybe one or two things that stand out to you that is your passion, or that you want to encourage other families who are on this path, or that you wish somebody had told you, or that you were worried about and that it really wasn't that big of a deal? Is there anything that stands out that you want to make sure that the families hear tonight as they're pursuing the child that they feel called to adopt?
I have a lot of potential adoptive parents who ask me about our children because of the color of their skin, and they want to know, I don't know how to word this, but they just want to know how we have our children in the situation that we're in, with us being white, and they're not white and they're surrounded by white families. They're concerned when they start their adoption process. Is this really what I want? Do I want to do this too?
Mm-hmm.
Can I handle the ugly comments, or even the curious comments and questions and stares? And I just want to say that you can handle it. It's not as big of a deal as we make it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with older child adoption and adopting out of birth order, we don't seem to be doing things the way that other people would do them, as far as doing things the natural way, I guess.
Right.
And it's okay to step out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And pursue something that, there are times that are terrifying, but it's definitely a blessing.
Yeah, it's not just a blessing for us, it's a blessing for our children. It's a blessing for that potential child that you're considering adopting. Yeah. You don't know them yet, but you're going to change their life forever.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about that this week. Because mostly I'm familiar with open adoption through Lifetime, and I work with birth moms that are thinking about adoption, and then I also work with the families. And I was thinking about it because a lot of times people feel called to foster adoption or to international adoption because they want to rescue a child. But the same is true for all the types of adoption, that essentially this child needs you, and then, when it comes to knowing the birth family, that birth family needs you too. Your future child's birth mother needs you. And that really, I don't know that I want to say that adoption is a higher calling, but I just think if it's on your heart, you should pursue it and see how that unfolds, because as all these comments are pouring into you and to you both right now, these people are just inspired by your hearts and your open minds, and just that you're responsive to that call on your heart, that answer to your prayer, and just allowing your family to come together under God's hand, and not always questioning, like, well, are we sure? Is this the exact right answer? But just moving forward and taking step by step and exploring, okay, where's this going to go? And now we feel that we're called in this direction, so how do we get over there? I think it's really comforted a lot of people who have joined us tonight, and I'm so grateful to you guys for sharing your hearts.
Well, thanks for having us. One other thing I tell anybody that's interested in any form of adoption is you have to decide what's right for you and your family, and only you can make that decision. Your decision can't be based on somebody else's opinion of what you think you should do for your family.
Even if it is your family who have the strongest opinions.
Yeah, whose opinion you rely on the most. It has to be your decision to decide what's right for you and your family. And once you've made that decision on your own, every other question, comment, and or discuss from anybody, it'll become easier for you to deal with.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. And if you need more answers, you need more information, to reach out and start getting those. And don't always look to the people around you, but start looking on your own and exploring what you want. I love that you brought that up, because it's so true. I think probably with any choice that you make for your family, that it's about your family first, and then explaining to other people this is what we're doing, and not debating it.
And if they aren't on board with it and they don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, then you just, it's not as heartbreaking as you might think it would be. My dad, when I told him about Aiden, he was excited, and my mom told him that Aiden was not white. And I could hear him yelling over the phone when I was talking to my mom that he hated me and he didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. He was very angry. And I'm a daddy's girl, and it didn't matter. I was going to get my son. I didn't care. And by the end of the night, he was ready to come up there and support us. And he did.
And guess who kept Aiden the 5 weeks while we were in Congo?
My dad.
So their hearts were softened.
Very quickly.
That's cool.
And then, again, we had other family members who were not on board at all. And we just don't have anything to do with them. And it is what it is. And it's once you have your child, honestly, it does not matter.
There's no loss of love.
Yeah, not at all.
It's the love that you quote unquote lost between those family members or so-called friends that don't want anything to do with you now for whatever reason. Your child fills that void 100-fold.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm so grateful for you guys tonight and for sharing these photos. And we continue. People are pouring in their thank yous. They loved hearing your story, and they're really inspired by your hearts. And if you could see the comments, you would know there's people all over the country that are cheerleading for you, whether or not you can see them in your neighborhood. But we are excited to see how your family changes this summer when your baby girl comes along. And we'll look forward to seeing how adoption may touch your lives in the future, too.
Thanks.
So thank you again. And to those of you on the call tonight, I just want to thank you for spending time with us tonight. And if you have any questions or feedback from tonight's webinar, or any questions at all about your own adoption future, please feel free to share them. I'll give you my direct email. My name is Libby, that's Libby @lifetimeadoption.com, and I'll make sure that your questions go to the right coordinator who can answer them the best. And if you need more information, or you're still waiting to take that first step toward adopting or exploring an adoption with Lifetime, you can apply free online, and it's no obligation, but it helps us learn more about you and about your adoption needs and desires. And the easiest way to that is lifetimeadoption.com/apply. That's APPLY. And if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to call our office, 530-432-7373. And I will say goodnight and let all of you go, and we'll join together again in a couple weeks. Thank you. Good night.
Night.